Halloween is just around the corner, which means this week's episodes of the EPS podcast will involve things that relate to the spookiest time of the year. And who better to discuss the season of witches, ghosts, jack-o'-lanterns, and goblins than the Pumpkin King himself, Nick Vincent Barbera, aka Jack Skellington, at New York's Beetle House. The Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, and later Magic Kingdom, is considered by many as one of the handful of quote-unquote original rides, along with Dumbo the Flying Elephant and the Mad Tea Party. But even though the spirit of a haunted house was there from the start, what amusement park is complete without one, it really didn't materialize until over a decade after the park initially opened. Nick, who recently went viral with his Hatbox Ghost recording session video, joined me to break down this iconic Disney park staple. So I want to welcome you back to the EPS podcast, where everything's a primary source, and Season 2 has been great so far. I've got to talk to a lot of new people, but I've also welcomed return guests, and today is another one of those return guests. I have Nick Vincent Barbera with me. Last time we spoke, Nick, it was February, and we did an episode all about one of your workplaces, Beetle House NYC, where every day is Halloween. Now we're approaching Halloween, so it's only appropriate to have you back. So welcome back to the EPS podcast.
Thank you, my friend. Yeah, it has been a while. Almost like a good couple of thirds of the year at this point.
It felt kind of awkward back in February, talking so much, ghouls and goblins and Halloween type stuff. But
for some people, not for us.
Right, exactly. For us, it's every day is Halloween and has that potential to it. So today we are going to continue that theme because, and as usually, I think when we left things in February, we said the next topic should be Disney World or Disneyland or just the Disney parks. I think they're exceptional primary sources, but it's a big topic. So what better thing to narrow things down to the Haunted Mansion? And you have very recently gotten some notoriety from something you did regarding the Haunted Mansion.
Yes.
How long did that take? Because that was you made a video of yourself as one of the ghosts and doing kind of like the outtake from a recording.
That's right. Yeah.
How long did that take to set up?
Well, I guess I can break it down. The makeup took about a little over an hour to do. Right. Okay, so I should actually start for context reasons. Hi, hello, my name's Nick. You may have seen this video of the Hatbox Ghost from Disney's Haunted Mansion lip syncing to actual recording of Paul Frees recording his lines for the Ghost Host. And it started out on TikTok and then just kind of blew up from there, which I had no idea was going to happen. I was just doing it for fun.
But thus is the internet. That's how it works. Is that all it takes is for it to get under the nose of somebody who is interested. And you got some pretty notable names that liked it and shared it, right? Slash from Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, Slash likes me, I guess, and Butch Hartman, the guy who made Danny Phantom, really likes it, and he made Fairly Odd Parents too. But for our purposes, Danny Phantom. Yeah. I even got
Neil Patrick Harris, right?
Neil Patrick Harris saw it, and he's a big Haunted Mansion guy. He's a big on record. Yes, I love Haunted Mansion. So that blew me through the roof. Anyway, so the makeup took me about over an hour to do. And what's funny is that the one that ran viral, I'm not too proud of how that makeup came out, to be honest, because from a distance it looks good. but but up close, I'm just like, no, that's still me. Like, I don't know. And now I use a UV activated face paint for the Hatbox Ghost now, and I think I've got the face down pat finally. But yeah, so I did one recently of the Hatbox Ghost, who is pretty much like one of my top favorite characters of the Haunted Mansion, first of all. And second of all, I knew I wanted to be him this Halloween. And, I was just doing stuff on TikTok where I do. Sorry, this is turning into a too soon plug and self-promotion, but I apologize for that. But
no, that's part of what we do here.
Yeah, and I'll talk more about it when we get to the end. But I also do stuff with like pirates and wizards and a couple of other things with Jack Skellington here and there. But that was about it. A couple things with Cheshire Cat. But Hatbox Ghost is really the guy that's helping me right now, I suppose.
Yeah. What prompted it? Is it just a lifelong love of Haunted Mansion and what it has to offer as far as its role in spooky pop culture? Or
oh yes, absolutely. Growing up, I brushed upon it a little bit last time we chatted, but growing up, I really enjoyed the Haunted Mansion ride. I didn't ride it for the first time until I was 12 because I was a chicken, but I loved it ever since. And it has become pretty much like one of my must-dos every time I go to the Magic Kingdom. I have to get at least one ride of the Haunted Mansion in there.
That one definitely seems to always have a long line. Between that and Pirates, it's like the two must, and they're very related, as we'll explore momentarily. But it seems to be those are the must. And I like you, I didn't actually ride it for the first time. I think the very first time I visited Disney, I was approaching 30. I never had the chance to go. My dad had gone because when he was in the Air Force, I think there was one time where they, like when they were trying to get guys to re-sign up for the for the service, they would do promotional stuff, like send them to Disney World. And I remember him coming back and later in life, he told me about it. He's like, oh, this one ride, the ghost actually gets in the car with you. He's like, and I was like, for the longest time, I was trying to figure out what he meant. I was like, so like, do they beam like a holograph like into the thing next to you? I thought it was, and so like, here I am, I was like 25, 26 years old, and I get in the Haunted Mansion, and I'm not even, I hate haunted houses. Like I really, not my thing. I hate things jumping out at me. I don't like that at all. I don't like this, the jump scares stuff. But I was like going through it and trying to like connect what he had told me about the ride. And then finally, when you get to the end, when you get the hitchhiker, I'm like, oh, that's how they did it. Like, that's what I mean. Like you're looking in a mirror and you see a guy. It's not actually physically there next to you, but it's like a legendary ride, and it's part of Disney regardless of which park you go to.
And that's another thing that I really love about the Haunted Mansion, especially now, is that it has all of these centuries old effects that still hold up. They still really work. Some of them do, some of them kind of swap them out for more modern technologies, but the best example is the ballroom, because it's what you were talking about earlier. It's when they it's all about reflections, and it's still the use of three-dimensional figures and everything, but it doesn't really have anything that's modern about it, and it's still lovable. And it'll always be there. At least I hope it will. But it still wows people. Some people still have no idea how it works.
I've seen specials on TV where they reveal, the secrets of the magic of Disney, and especially things like. And I try not to watch too much of that because I like to go into those kinds of things with that, suspension of disbelief, because that's what makes it more fun. You could study that ballroom scene and probably figure it out. Especially, I think one time I was on it and it stopped. It got stuck. I don't know if somebody broke it further down the line, but I was,
Right.
We were there watching, the same scene, the woman spinning around over and over and over again. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's mirrors involved and, all sorts of stuff. But I wasn't trying too hard to learn about it.
Right.
When we got stuck, oh man, the worst one was we got stuck on the Winnie the Pooh ride.
Oh no.
Right around the part where he's having the heffalump nightmare. And so for like 20 minutes, we have these like faces just like bouncing back and forth, and like the lights were on, so it wasn't. And I'm like, this is kind of weird. Like
that's arguably that's arguably scarier than the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah,
just getting stuck on Winnie the Pooh.
And of course they're like, oh, we had a honey spill. They had to like Disneyfy it and everything. So
yeah, I do love that they Disneyfy that at least.
And that was actually the first thing that I took away when I was, because I was old enough to realize that it was all it wasn't
sure. Yeah.
Like real, it was all, but I marveled, and I still do every time I'm there, about how they do everything, from the parking lot all the way to the middle of the Magic Kingdom. I've only been to Disney World. I've never been to Disneyland. I'm hoping to do that next year. And it's like, even when you're waiting in line, one of those long lines, you're just like dazzled by everything around you. It's incredible. And so that launches directly into the analysis of the ride as a primary source, because the material that it's made from is all the things we were just mentioning. It was, like you said, centuries old techniques in some cases of, projecting ghosts or to make things look like spirits are all around you. And it was in the how it was made. Walt Disney seemed to have it in his head right away that he wanted some kind of, or his Imagineers from the get-go wanted to have some kind of haunted attraction as part of Disneyland when it was first opening up, but it seemed to have taken a really long time to actually materialize. In fact, doing my I try not to do too much research, because that kind of defeats the purpose of like, what does it tell us? But it didn't open until 1969. What does that tell you, that a theme park of any kind, but especially this one that had such a vision to be, a destination theme park that people would come from all over the country, all over the world to come see, that it was like, we need to have the haunted house. Like, we need some kind of haunted attraction. What does that tell you about the time period and the place?
I think, well, fun houses have always been kind of a part of theme park history ever since like theme parks began.
Yeah.
If not a haunted house, you just have like a great house of like illusions, as Walt Disney once called it, actually. Like, he would have a lot of mirrors that made you look funny, stairs that would kind of wobble, or things like that. And then the dark ride came around, like the old style pretzel dark rides around like the 20s, the 30s. And that was free game to put in like scary imagery in there. Right. I saw this really great Travel Channel special from, let's say, the 90s about this very thing, where theme parks would just use them. They would just see that everybody was loving them. And they said, okay, well, we're a theme park, and I guess people really expect us to put it in there, so let's just do it. But with Walt Disney, what was great about him was that he would take things like that and he would up the ante with them. So in the case of the Haunted Mansion, I suppose he and his Imagineers were like, okay, so we got the haunted house in there, but how can we make this one different from the other ones?
Right.
And like you said, it didn't open until 1969. So it went through a lot of different changes throughout the development process. And I think, for the time period, they really had to figure out how the heck to technically an old style attraction like this work in 69,
right?
And
then it was almost like, I picture Disney World is kind of like Death Star 2. It's like they took all the things from the original Disneyland, and for Magic Kingdom they're like, okay, it's going to be baked in right away, we don't need to add it later. All the mistakes from the previous one we're going to fix, and all the successes from the previous one we're going to just put right in there. And so they had, because wasn't it, I think the story goes that, like, Walt Disney was in Tomorrowland, and he sees a cowboy from Frontierland walking through, and he's like, that should not happen, it breaks the illusion.
That doesn't work.
The next
that
park,
work at all.
We need to, but so the Haunted Mansion, it's a no-brainer. It gets built right away into Magic Kingdom, and there's a version of it all in all the Disney parks around the world. So it seems to be like transcend, cultures, that you need to have some kind of, ride that. So it seems like as they were conceptualizing the Haunted Mansion, between Disney and his Imagineers, that they were kind of like cross between, do we make it scary or do we make it family friendly, and no pun intended, is it going to be goofy? And so that kind of goes up to the material of it, is that, do you take the existing Disney characters and turn them into ghosts? Does that confuse people if you were to do that? Or do you have to invent new ones and, walk that fine line between the macabre and, knowing that most of your audience is going to be kids. So, you don't want to freak them out too much. It's a tough one to balance with, especially in the time period of the 60s, looking at the, kind of the audience, in that time period when they're first conceiving the idea, early 1960s, that's a much different audience than by 1969. Not only are the kids grown up by that point, they're 9 years older, but it seems that the entire society has matured quite a bit, lost its innocence in many ways. So, what is permissible or not in the early part of that decade is not, people have kind of shrugged it off more so by the end of the decade. So it's almost like they had to go back to the drawing board several times.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, like I said, the Haunted Mansion went through many different iterations and incarnations throughout the years that it was starting to be brought into light, that Imagineering. They wanted it to be a walkthrough at first, because they thought, well, that's just the classic way. Let's just have people walk through this haunted house. There'd be a different vignette or effect in every room that they could just stand there and watch unfold. And with that, there were many different stories that came and went. There was one involving a sea captain and his bride. Some of it eventually got in there. Not all of it intentionally, but there was something about that. And then there was this story of just this really unlucky family called the Bloodmere family that got canned. They wanted to work in the Headless Horseman in there somewhere.
That would have been cool.
Yeah, seriously, that would have been amazing. And then I think the Lonesome Ghost too, from that Mickey Mouse cartoon. Yeah. They wanted to try and go all out with all these different ideas, but they just didn't know what to do with them. And then the World's Fair happened, and they were like, all right, well, we can wait some more, I guess.
Right.
And then unfortunately Walt Disney passed, and then it's like, oh, well, now we truly don't know what to do now.
And you see that kind of loss of direction in some of the movies that they put out around that time too. Last season, a friend of mine and I analyzed my favorite Disney movie, which is Robin Hood. And, I love it, but there's a lot of recycled animation in that, from Aristocats especially. And there's lots of, just kind of like shortcuts. It's not Disney in either of its primes. It's not, 50s Disney, and it's definitely not, where it became in the late 80s and 90s. with the Renaissance. And so it seems like when he passed, there was probably a lot of conversation going on in all the different aspects of the Disney world of saying, all right, do we take a guess as to what his vision was? What did Walt want? Or, do we have, kind of carte blanche to go our own direction now? As long as we, kind of keep one foot into the Walt world, ideas with everything and make it Disney-fied. So that's a tough one. Like when the maker of the park and the maker of the brand and who holds the name, is not there anymore. Does that, move things around as far as, what they should do, to honor him? So I think we have it nailed down as to why they made it. And that's because you need a haunted house. That's just basic, right. Every amusement park I've ever been to has one, of some form or another. It's not like a uniquely Disney thing. But what's interesting is so many other rides at the park are attached to existing Disney properties or Disney stories. There's Peter Pan's Flight Over London. There's the ultra exciting Swiss Family Robinson treehouse that you can walk around in. I remember the first time I was in that, I was like, oh, that's it. You just walk, like, you don't get to do anything. Just like admire, like, oh, that's pretty cool that they made it look like they are stranded here in the middle of a theme park. And then, you have all the, there's the Snow White ride. There's, every, like I mentioned before, the Winnie the Pooh one. This one and Pirates are not based in any of their previous stories. They had to invent all of, like you were saying, so many ideas came up and then were tossed aside or watered down, compromised. And so what you get when you're going through it is not, there's no narrative that you can base it on. It's not like one, you're like, oh yeah, I saw Peter Pan, so I know essentially what this ride's all about. Do you think that was like a good decision on their part to invent the story for the ride itself, or do you think it was taking a risk?
I think it was a mix of both, because around this time you have a lot of different attractions that just kind of came from the brains of the Imagineers. They didn't really have anything that was seeped in movie stuff. Like we had the Tiki Room. That was the first like audio animatronic thing. And that didn't have a single existing Disney character to be seen.
Yeah.
And then you had stuff that came later, like great moments with like Mr. Lincoln. And he was a real life person. That wasn't a Disney character, but that kind of falls under that umbrella. And then you have the Carousel of Progress, where you have completely new characters that were designed from just the image of the good old household family.
Right.
And things like It's a Small World, where that's just the general children of the world, So, So when it came to stuff like Pirates and the Haunted Mansion, I like to think that it was just the Imagineers, or even the Jungle Cruise. There wasn't an existing Disney character in there when it first came out. So I think it was just the Imagineers just toying with all these different ideas, visuals and immersive environments, and just going with it. That I did mention earlier that the Headless Horseman was one of the ideas, but then again, in regards to the history of this attraction, that's just it. It was just an idea. Right. And it could have been technically a use of Disney using an IP in that attraction even back then. But, I think they went with the completely different direction because I'm thinking at the time they were like, no, let's do something that people won't expect. And then we'll just go from there. And then, so that's what I think happened.
The ride is very layered, and you can kind of see it work itself out from when you first get into the building and they put you into the room that stretches, and then you make your way to the cars and get into that line, and then when you're actually on the ride itself, you go from pretty scary, kind of traditional in the middle of the dark, can't see anything going on. Then you get some, silliness, and then back to some spookiness. And then by the time you're on your way out, it's a good mix, like in the final room. Now, you've been on both of them, the Disneyland and Disney World?
Yes, I have.
Are they identical rides? Or are they slight differences?
In terms of feel, they're pretty identical. Obviously, you get the same general feeling of, the spooky house. But the biggest differences between Disneyland and Disney World is that the stretching room in Disneyland is the giant elevator. Okay. And the one at Disney World is not. That one is designed in a way where the ceiling goes up as opposed to where the floor goes down. Because if we know one thing about Florida, you dig too deep and you have a natural pool, right? So they still wanted to keep that gag in there, though, because they knew that everybody loved it so much. Yeah. So it's in there. It just operates differently. And from there, you go straight to the Doom buggies, and you go through a couple of extra rooms that aren't found in Disneyland, like a hallway of portraits, a library, and a music room. And as of 2007, they have this gorgeous display of these endless Escher-style staircases, and they have candles that go in and out, and ghostly footprints that show up on the steps and then disappear. And then the rest of the ride is practically like the Disneyland one. But those are the biggest changes there. Outside of that, the feel is still there. It's still the same.
And I mean, the outside, facade is also totally different. The Disneyland one is a, Louisiana plantation house kind of look to it, whereas the Florida one, just a traditional mansion, haunted house kind of style. But I mean, that answers the question of where was it made or locations associated with it, because, I wouldn't even thought of that about Florida and the position that it's in geographically, that, you want to give them that same experience, but the geography is going to keep you from doing it, because, you're just going to be in a swamp basically. And, it's funny because that is the part, like almost immediately I get disoriented with the stretching room, because I'm like, okay, I came in this door and now I'm going to be going out the same where am I? It's like I try so hard to like solve the puzzle, and I'm like, okay, I just give up. I'm just going to go on the ride now. There's the Doom buggy. I'll just get in and enjoy it. And we took our son there when he was about 2, because he was, under the age of 3, they're free in Disney. So, not that after, between the flight and the, rental car and our tickets and everything, I'm like, oh, we saved $50. Sure. But it was still, wonderful seeing him experience it. And we did, I was kind of worried. I was like, okay, is he going to handle Haunted Mansion okay? Because you do have that, layers of scary, and he got off of it, and he couldn't really talk very well back then, but he just goes, that was cool. So we're like, all right, it gets his seal of approval, and he said got something similar for the Pirates of the Caribbean. So a very important part of this, and when I have this primary source analysis form that I use, it's we'll answer the questions without even realizing it. We're not necessarily going through that, but just going back to the maker's role or status in society, it seems like the Disney company, like we were just saying, went through a lot of changes. Its status, by the time they opened the original theme park, it was obviously a very high status. It wasn't like something that a family's like, who's this Disney guy and what's this park all about? I mean, people had been deeply interested in Disney for decades by that point, and so the status was very, very high. How did the status, as far as you can tell, how can that role of Disney in society, how does the Haunted Mansion fit in with that? Because I really do think it is one of the kind of the crown jewels of the parks is the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah. Well, I think it might have to do with the fact that you have a combination of quite a few different factors. We're talking about the again, the 60s, the age around Disneyland, where after 59 came to town and they had a lot of different things in regard to Tomorrowland, where it was submarines, Matterhorn, and then all that jazz. And then you have stuff like the stuff from the World's Fair that I talked about, the Carousel of Progress, and It's a Small World, and Mr. Lincoln, and the Tiki Room, and all that stuff. And then with Walt Disney's passing and Pirates of the Caribbean being hailed as like one of Walt Disney's like last creative touches to the park, like a tribute to him.
Mm-hmm.
I think the same can be said for the Haunted Mansion, because both of them were made around the same time, and Walt got to see quite a number of development being made into the Haunted Mansion that we know now. And because of that, some people still attribute to it as Walt Disney's Haunted Mansion. And like even that Kurt Russell special that came out by the time that the ride opened, where Kurt Russell was talking about the mansion as the ride, and he literally just finished it off by saying, "So Mr. Disney built a haunted mansion." Mm-hmm. So, I think that's what it's got to be. At least that's where I think in that point of view.
It's like one of those things where it couldn't be anywhere else. You go to other haunted houses, and even if they use that same omni-mover style of going through the attraction, it's just not Disney. It's just nothing compares to it. And so it's like the ultimate. And I've been to Disney for Halloween time, and they know how to do it right. I've been to Universal Studios at Halloween time, and at least when I went, they didn't do it right. It was just over the top, people with chainsaws running all over the place, and not like that nice balance, that Disney hits. Like, it's when they do the Halloween parade, it's all their characters are involved in it, but it's almost like they opened the gates to the Haunted Mansion, and that's what's producing the entire spectacle. That all of the Disney spookiness that has come since then emanates from Haunted Mansion. Even things that seem as remote as Hocus Pocus, they have that nice balance that the Haunted Mansion struck back in the 60s and the early 70s with Disney World, and they are kind of the propelling anything Disney that has the scary factor into it. And like the song that they sing throughout the parade, at least when the times I've been there, is they keep saying, they remind you it's really not so scary. It's like we'll bring you to that point, maybe not even that close to the line of terrifying, but we'll, through our magic that we have here, we'll get you pretty far along, but then we'll remind you that there's Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and and all that. It's not actually that skin crawling, no. Like you're worried for your well-being at the. The 1960s in America started as an extension of 1950s prosperity and optimism, but ended in darkness and despair. Pop culture throughout the time period reflects this in so many ways. Therefore, the Haunted Mansion ride, which was conceptualized early in the decade, but did not come into fruition until the end, is a very unique primary source. For instance, what was scary in 1963 may not have been so by 1969. The audience of the early 1960s had grown and matured, perhaps become a bit cynical, and so the dark ride could have very easily been outdated as soon as it was released. However, thanks in large part to the vision of Walt Disney and his Imagineers, the ride was built to allow for flexibility and change over time, making it relevant then and for the last 50 years. You know, we chatted a little bit before about the intended audience of the Haunted Mansion, and it's and you hinted it and actually came out and said it, that throughout its history they've added to it and they've, you know, modified it, and you have a special connection to it because I understand at the Christmas time they'll incorporate Jack Skellington and company into parts of it. Do you think that speaks to, over the years, who the intended audience is? That it's almost like a moving target, just like the ride itself is moving.
Yeah, that was good. I think so, because, you know, in a way, it's fascinating because those are two very separate entities. You know, we're talking about this ride that has been around since the late 60s, and it still conveys a creepy, spooky vibe. Like how you were saying earlier, like how sometimes when Disney makes something that is spooky, it akins to the Haunted Mansion.
Right.
Because that's how impactful it's become. And with something like Nightmare Before Christmas, you know, ultimately we think about the Tim Burton visual style, you know, that's just part of his whole bag, his deal. So when you combine the two of them together, you know, at first a lot of people would scratch their heads and just think, God, like, really? Do we want to see this? Like, I'm not sure. But it ended up being like a match made in heaven, because you have a brilliant environment that's already set in stone for Jack and the crew.
Yeah.
And then the way that they conveyed it to plus it and not tamper with any of the classic stuff in a way that feels too permanent. What they've done is spent, so it's not permanent, which is, I have roads, and I can assure you it is so wonderful in person. But, you know, we still have a soft spot for the regular Haunted Mansion, as we should, you know, because that really set the groundwork for a whole bunch of spooky haunted house vibes. Right. But anyway, I'm rambling again now. But basically, yeah, I think in terms of the the general audience and what it strives for, definitely over the years, it's become so much that people usually associate the two of them together. I mean, I just came back from Spirit Halloween this year, and there is a section for Haunted Mansion items. And would you believe it, is placed right next to the Nightmare Before Christmas items. Yeah. So I think, you know, when you put the two of them side by side, it really does make the line become a little blurry. Not to say that's a bad thing, but it's, you know, it falls under that umbrella of Disney spookiness now.
Right. Which is, and it's
like you said, Hocus Pocus. Those are the top three things that we think about when we think about Disney spookiness. We think of Haunted Mansion, Nightmare Before Christmas, and Hocus Pocus. And
they're like the safe go-tos this time of year.
I'm sorry. I was just,
you know, we tend to like, you know, around my household, you know, we watch a lot of kid-friendly scary movies, and so you know, those we haven't watched the Eddie Murphy Haunted Mansion at all, because I don't think that one went as good as like Pirates of the Caribbean did. But when it comes to those, what's funny is that Casper we watch a lot of Casper this time of
Right.
year, and that's not a Disney property, but it steals a strong word, but it takes a lot of the aesthetics of Haunted Mansion and incorporates it in there. I mean, when you're watching Casper, and I'm talking about the Bill Pullman one, not any of the sequels or anything, it's very Disney-esque. The animations, the uncles of Casper look like it. The effects smack of Disney. The cosmetics of the mansion that they're living in, it is a haunted mansion. It's, and even the part where Christina Ricci's character is, Casper shows her the hidden chamber. She's riding a car that looks like a doom buggy as she makes her way around, and I'm guaranteed it's because they recognize that the okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's curious.
It's just my laptop acting up again.
What was the last thing you heard me say? I just want to.
You were talking about Casper showing Christina Ricci.
Okay, that's pretty much when it dropped off for me. So. I can't help but think that there's a, when designing Casper and everything, that they were like, we are tapping into, and it would, for I think a casual viewer, they would just be like, yeah, it's Disney.
Right.
It looks so much similar, because it's just, that's, I think that's more of the effect of Haunted Mansion. The impact it's made on pop culture is that it's kind of set the standard for what a haunted house looks like and how one should behave within it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like what to expect, kind of thing. But yeah, the intended audience throughout this entire era of ever since it came into our lives, as part of his, they have to continue to match what the culture finds as scary, because we have changed that quite a bit. Back in the 60s,
right.
And that was the time when the movie theater was where you'd go for scary. That's the age of Psycho, and,
right. Yeah.
By the end of the decade into the 70s, we're talking Rosemary's Baby and Exorcist, and these major classic horror movies. That's the movie theater, and you can definitely see the appetite for that escalate as time goes on. If Haunted Mansion didn't change over the years, then it would be a relic of a bygone era. But because it does update itself, even just a little bit at a time, it stays relevant, doesn't it?
It does. I think that what they have done to do that is really fun too. This might turn as like a little side note, but it's a thought that I've had for so many years. Whenever we see a ride that gets changed, or an attraction that gets changed rather, and sometimes the usual reception is, oh, how dare they? Why would they do that? Why would they change it? But no, that's what Walt wanted. He wanted these things to still keep fresh, and even if it means changing classic stuff, then let's do it. Let's just do it. And I think what they've done with Haunted Mansion over the years, by making Madame Leota float and adding in the murderous bride in the attic, or even much better, bringing the Hatbox Ghost back. I think stuff like that is really perfect in order to still keep it feeling as if it's just as classic as it was many years ago, but also adding in stuff that will keep it relevant and will keep people talking. I was actually watching the Eddie Murphy movie the other day with a couple friends of mine, and that came out in 2003, and Constance Hatchaway didn't show up until 2006. And but that's how that change works so well, because people remember that better than the Eddie Murphy movie.
Right.
So we were watching the movie together, and she just said, "So wait, there's no murderous bride," and I had to explain. Well, that didn't come until much really impactful.
Yeah.
And for the record, I actually do kind of like the Eddie Murphy movies.
I can't say for
It's not my
I can't
favorite,
judge
but
it. I haven't seen it, but I remember when they came out with it, it was after the success of Pirates, and I was like, well, this is obvious that they're just, a ride inspired a movie instead of the other way around, and so they're like, let's go with that. And I think I saw that there's another one coming out next year.
There is, yeah.
So I'm imagining that a lot of those changes in the storylines that have come up since the Eddie Murphy movie, maybe in spite of it, are going to be incorporated.
Yeah, they mentioned something about Constance being in it.
I can see.
I'm excited about. I like to see that.
It's almost like Star Wars, where the title is always going to be there, but the story is more reflective of the time it's made in, rather than, they're not always going to just remake the 70s, and early 80s version of Star Wars. It's, so maybe we'll have, maybe the Haunted Mansion will turn into a 9-part, series and epic, and we'll get to know everybody. There'll be, magic, like all sorts of father and son, trade-offs with the Hatbox Ghost and everything, as we go through it. And, but I was, go ahead.
Like a really cool idea. I would like to see a streaming anthology series about the family, about the Gracie family, how they were in life, and how the house became haunted. Oh my God! I'm sorry. You just got me thinking of a whirlwind.
So I think I would be in favor of, and this is something I've thought about for a long time. I would be in favor of like a series that tells stories that it's not until the last part of the show, the episode, that you realize what it's a prequel to. Like I had this idea for a long time. I was like, of a movie or something called Shadow of a Doubt, and it's all about Miranda from Mrs. Doubtfire in her college years, and then at the end of the movie or the episode, she meets Daniel, and you realize, like, oh my God, that's Mrs. Doubtfire that's connected to. And it's almost like a guessing game for the audience. And so you could do something like that with Haunted Mansion, where it's like the backstory of the family, in life. And then at the very end, you're like, oh, it's Haunted Mansion. That's what it is. That'd be a fun, series to get people into, or, it could push the boundaries a lot. You could be like, that background character in Kindergarten Cop. This whole episode's about him, what he did moments before John Kimball came into the party scene or whatever. When it goes to Pirates, the companion ride or the inspirational ride to Haunted Mansion, I was unfortunate. I never got to go on the original Pirates. I went on the first time I ever went on Pirates of the Caribbean, which is my all-time favorite ride at Disney. It was heavily influenced by the movies. So like you got on it, and then there was the captain with the tentacle face,
Davy Jones.
Davy Jones, yeah, he shows up on the waterfall and tells you something, and then there's the captain from the why the names are escaping me right now, but he's on the ship, and then Jack Sparrow, Barbosa, and he's in it through a few times, and then Jack Sparrow pops up throughout the entire ride. And so I didn't see it any different. I was like, oh, okay, that's Pirates of the Caribbean. That's how the ride goes. My wife, my now wife, was like, oh, they changed it. She was used to, because she'd been going to Disney since she was a little girl. She was used to the classic ride, the one that wasn't changed around. And so I wasn't at all disappointed. I mean, I guess maybe I was like, well, it would have been cool to see the original 60s one come out, but like you said before, that's not the spirit of the, it's like, if you want the ride that never changes. Just go to the theme park that likewise doesn't change, go to the amusement park.
Right.
It's the same rides every year, and they don't, they update it every 10 years, maybe, with a new ride, but nothing changes. It's the same place you've been all your life. And that just doesn't work for Disney's business model at all.
No,
to just stay stagnant and not change anything ever. So I think they do a really nice job of what I think a successful nostalgia artist does, which is to keep one foot planted in the familiar and then move the other foot pivoting into the new and different ideas.
Yes.
And they're masters at it. And I think Walt Disney himself was a master at that. And that's what they've carried on throughout. My last question for you, because I think we've done a pretty good job of talking about the ideas and behavior that it conveys. But my last question is, and it's one I don't always include with analyzing primary sources, but like these, but is it prescriptive or descriptive? And so the difference, of course, is, does it want you to do or think a certain way versus just showing you a description of, in this case, what a haunted house should be or is? Do you think that there's a certain way that they want you to take it as you are going on the Haunted Mansion?
Well, I think that the intention of the ride, I think, applies to the same way as the original version of Pirates of the Caribbean, where the Pirates ride was about pirates and what they do or what they did. And this ride is basically, this is a haunted house. You're going to go see ghosts. And that's about it. So there really isn't a story involved, at least not back then. But with the addition of Constance and everything like that, I always like to think that Disney left the ride up to you to find it prescriptive. Like, there's been lots of different books and movies and like even fan-made films that kind of allowed the fans and the writers to make up the stories themselves. I use Constance as an exception because we kind of get the general story from Constance when you enter the attic now. Yeah. Is that, she married a bunch of guys, kind of murdered them, and now she's still looking for a husband even in death. So you have that. And you have other things like I said, the Gracie family. Actually, if you don't mind, that's a great example of how a guest could perceive it. So they would see the tombstone outside that says Master Gracie laid to rest, no mourning please at his request. So not only is it a good tribute to the actual Imagineer Yale Gracie, who made a lot of the illusions that you see in the attraction, but people see the name Master Gracie and they think, oh, okay, he must be the master of the house. Is he the ghost host? No, he couldn't be because, well, he may seem very masterly, but that couldn't be it. So who's the ghost host then? Okay, so the ghost host looks like that guy who's got the hatchet in that painting that you see on this scene. And then people just go from there. They just kind of ask questions and then they try to fill the void within it. It's like, okay, so how does this relate to Madame Leota? Where did she come from? How does she relate to all of these ghosts? Well, she brings the ghosts about, so she knows her stuff about the supernatural world. Okay, but how does she know Master Gracie? So Disney, so far anyway, I don't know what the upcoming movie has in store, but Disney has kind of kept it mostly vague, which I like, because that means that everybody has their own story. Everybody has their own take about certain characters and how they relate. In a way, I like to think it's the equivalent of legitimately having a haunted house in your neighborhood, and everybody has a story about that house, and all of them are different. Right. That, I think, is kind of a happy little accident in regards to being a parallel of that. And now it's making me think, I want this upcoming movie to be really, really good, but I don't want it to take away from that. Right. So you don't want it to pull back too much of the curtain. Right. So hopefully Hopefully that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you point that out, because I love because again, only at Disney can this really happen, where they almost present you with a puzzle to solve in even the most basic, most straightforward seeming ride that there's, even if it's just something as simple as looking for the hidden Mickeys throughout it, the mouse ears. There's entire books about that, like trying to decode and look for them all over the parks. But yeah, they give you that as a way to immerse yourself further into the ride. It's prescribed into it that, yeah, you could just ride it for the sake of being on a haunted ride, but you could also try to figure it out, because it's not just a chaotic, assortment. It's not like we were saying before about like the local carnival or, boardwalk amusement park that has the haunted house, and whenever there's a clearance sale at the Halloween stores on November 1st, they just scoop up a bunch of spooky stuff and then throw it in there for the next summer. It has no rhyme or reason to it. That these things, I'm sure somewhere either in the back of somebody's mind or in a vault somewhere in Disney World, they have the actual story and how everything connects, and who that disembodied voice belongs to as you're on the ride. And it's not just a happenstance, or it's not haphazard in any way. It's probably, I think about like Toy Story. We see the surface of it and it's an enjoyable movie, but there's an entire backstory that the creator made. The producer, I forget his name, but like Andy has like a whole history behind him. His father has a history, a guy you never see in the movies. Like that Woody is his toy from when he was growing up, because Woody is definitely not a modern, 90s toy. He's from the 50s or 60s. Yeah. And that he, so they've had it written all out. The whole thing is like all there. Well before they, in the case of Toy Story, started doing the digital animations. And so you got to think that things like Haunted Mansion, which has it has more of a possibility of a storyline than Pirates does, it has that somewhere. So there's maybe in that the hidden club at Disney, it has the on the wall, it explains it all. They have some kind of paper in a frame, and it's like, okay, here's the story. But simultaneously, the fact that they've added to it over the years tells you that maybe they're doing a lot of slipstream type stuff where they're just kind of basing it on the original idea. But to wrap things up, that's Disney for you. You're not going to get amateur style storytelling in any way.
No. But yeah, I mean, that's really the chief reason why I love this ride so much. It's because it's something that feels very classical, the definitive, we're going to go inside a haunted house now in this theme park, but it's something that doesn't feel dated as some people would think it would feel.
Yeah.
Like I've known, as sad as it sounds, I've known a few people in my life who, they're all about the thrill rides, which is nothing wrong with that. But sometimes when I say, oh, cool, we should do Haunted Mansion afterwards, and like, really, you want to do that one? I'm like, yeah, what's the problem? And they're like, yeah, but it's so slow. I'm like, okay. Doesn't mean it isn't cool. I enjoy it. I'm gonna go on this ride. I'll see you guys at the exit, whatever. But because they are right in a way. It is old fashioned. It's right under the umbrella with the classic dark rides that aren't the fastest in the world. But the atmosphere and the scenes that you go through and everything that has been so seeped in culture because of how classic it is really does come from that special place. And because of that, it's become so enjoyable that even though it's changed quite in some ways over the years. In a way, it's changed very little.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you pointed out at the very beginning about the fun houses, at places like Coney Island or, any of the trolley parks throughout the country over the years. And so in a lot of ways, Walt Disney himself, and he did this beyond just rides at his parks, but also with a lot of his stories that he told, he was like a torchbearer. He lit the torch from his own youth, his, the late 19th and early 20th century style of entertainment and amusements, and carried it. Obviously the torch got brighter, because of him and the capabilities that he has, but he's passing that on to us. And that's why when you go to any of the parks, it's, by riding the ride, you're not, they've updated it like we've been saying, but you're basically participating in 19 teens, style entertainment,
right?
That's the connection that you get. It's not about, and I there's only a handful of thrill rides at Magic Kingdom, traditional roller coasters. There's a few, and I know they've added a couple over the years just because that's to match what the audience wants. But that's not why, speaking personally, that's not why I go to Magic Kingdom. I go to Magic Kingdom for those kinds of, the dark rides, the ones that it's known for, that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, how many times to cap it off? How many times can we look at that house, no matter what park you look at, and not hear the first thing that comes into our heads, which is, "Welcome, foolish mortals, to the haunted mansion." Because that's just how it is, it just feels so good. I don't know. I can't think of any better way to explain it.
No, and the grinning ghosts song is just one of the only ones that you can you never get tired of. Because
we're at this time of year again, and because I've been thinking about Haunted Mansion a lot, that song has been, I am proud to say, it's been stuck in my head for a good week and a half. And I am not angry about that in the slightest.
And then as soon as we get done with Thurl Ravenclaw singing that, it'll be time for the Grinch. Yeah. And so he's with us for a solid 3 months.
Mr. Grinch. Yeah, he'll be. He gets around. He's got like a great booming voice.
He owns like a quarter of the calendar for us.
Yeah.
And the voices that you just provided exactly underscore why I'm so glad I was able to have you on again on my show, because I couldn't have done this without you. And this episode's going to be airing right before Halloween, so I want to say,
good, wonderful,
happy Halloween to you. And now that it's not February, it's more appropriate to say it.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you again, Nick Vincent Barbera, for joining me on the EPS podcast, where everything's a primary source, everything, including the Haunted Mansion. Where can people find you online if they want to follow you or see the viral video if they haven't already?
Well, thank you, Eric. Pretty much the main thing I drive my focus on. I know I'm going to sound like one of those kids, but it's my TikTok. Nick Vincent Barbera is my username. And I know it's just my name, but it kind of encompasses everything that I do. And not just Hatbox Ghost stuff. I have a couple of original characters. I do Captain Grimsley Carver, the pirate, and and I enjoy you too, laddie. And Professor Stone, who's this wizard man that I use for one of my jobs, but I brought it over to TikTok, and you seem to like me, so there I am. And some stuff with the Cheshire Cat, with this really nice puppy that I do. And, of course, Jack Skellington is there as well to celebrate Halloween and a little bit of Christmas. And of course, the Hatbox Ghost, which is this voice I use. I don't ask you why you sound like you do, so that's why I'll do that. So yeah, quite a lot of. Sorry, I had a little out of body experience there, but that's chiefly what I do over there. And I also have an Instagram, which is Nick the Ghost Host 999. For our purposes, I'll leave you to figure out what that means. And those are the two main things that you can find me on there. So there you go.
Well, I really hope that everybody listens to this, goes immediately and seeks those different sites out and enjoys everything that you produce as much as I do. And I want to thank you once again for joining me on the EPS podcast, where everything's a primary source. And we'll talk to you next time.
You got it. And can I?
Oh,
I know we should have ended it by now, but can I add a little ending for our Haunted Mansion stuff?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. It's a different character, but just bear with me. Hurry back. Hurry back. Be sure to bring your death certificate. If you decide to join us, make final arrangements now. We've been dying to have you.
This is Season 2 of the EPS podcast. I hope you've enjoyed listening to what you've heard so far. Full-length episodes like this one are being delivered on Thursdays, while shorter episodes, the products of my EPS podcast live exhibits, come out on Tuesdays. If you like what you hear, consider becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/EPS podcast. Follow the show on social media, including YouTube, and especially on Instagram. I look forward to you tuning in again to the EPS podcast, where everything is a primary source. And I hope you have a very happy Halloween.